Dum dum da dum. Guys, I hope you have as much fun writing this wedding toast speech as I have watching it. The wedding toast is one of my personal favorites because it gives me a chance to see you express emotion. That's not always comfortable for everybody, but let me tell you, when you express the right emotion, it hooks your audience and it makes them say, this person has something I want to hear. They see that emotion in you, they feel it within their own being, and they say, I'm going to tune in for this. And that's why this speech is the first one. We're going to tackle pathos. Buckle up.
All right, guys, let's get into it. So first we're going to go over the structure. So you are going to want to begin your wedding toast by saying hello to the audience and describing your relationship to the bride or groom. A lot of people might already know you, but there may be some guests from out of town that don't really know the relationship. So you'll want to state, this is my sister, this is my brother, this is my roommate from college, whatever the case may be. So it'll sound something like, hello everyone. What a beautiful day. I am the maid of honor. My name's Kendall, and I am the sister of the beautiful bride. Something as simple as that. The next part will be an expression of thanks, typically to the parents. Now, this is an etiquette thing, to thank the person who's responsible for paying for the wedding. This day and age, it could be the parents, it could be the bride and groom themselves, it could be anyone, really. Could be multiple people. You just want to thank those people. If you don't know the specifics about who paid, you could just make it a general thank you for having us all here today. But it is customary in a wedding toast to say a thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Haverty. This is a beautiful occasion that you've created. The food is scrumptious and the decorations are just unbelievable. What an occasion to have everyone here in this room sharing this special moment. Something simple like that. Now we get into the fun parts. You want to take the audience on a trip down memory lane. What does this mean? Do you know in movies where you will have those moments where you hear music playing and you start to see a montage of flashbacks? The example that comes to mind for me is Father of the Bride. If you guys have seen the Father of the Bride with Steve Martin, when he's laying in bed at night, it's the night before his daughter's wedding, and you start to hear this really sweet, nostalgic song, and you see all his, favorite memories of his daughter's life, starting with the time that she was a baby, one of her as a toddler, one of her in elementary school doing her homework with glasses on, one of her graduating from high school, and then, a more recent one. So this is what you want to create for your audience. You want to take them on a trip down memory lane that highlights your relationship with this person that you are giving your toast for. So, if it's a sibling, you're going to have a lot of memories. What are your favorite childhood memories? Did you get in a lot of mischief together? Did you play practical jokes together? You probably have memories of family beach vacations and make-believe games that you played. Did you play school? Did you play house? Did you pretend to be princesses? Or for boys, did you play football in the backyard together and tackle each other? Was there ever a trip to the ER because of some kind of shenanigan you got into? These funny stories are what the audience is going to remember. So you want to really create a strong emotional and visual impact with these memories. You also want to then introduce your first memory of the couple. The reason this is important is because, depending on how old you are, your stage of life, when your friend or loved one is getting married, you might not know their significant other that well. If you have a long history, if it's your sibling, if you spend a ton of time with the person, or you were all friends in college or something of that nature, you might have a lot to talk about. But sometimes you might be giving a toast to someone who, you just haven't gotten to know the person that well, especially if you guys are adults, you're working, you live in different states. So introducing the first memory of the couple allows you to bring in the other half of that relationship. So this could be something silly, sweet, awkward. It could be your memory of your friend first calling you to tell you they had fallen in love, or that they had met somebody really special, or your memory of their reaction, their response to that first date, or the first time you saw them together and you saw the spark in their eyes and the way that they embraced one another, or you realized something really silly that they had in common. And that brings me to the next part, which is what makes this couple special. Every couple has something. It might be that they have some odd quirks in common. Maybe they have the same silly sense of humor. Maybe they both love to travel. Or maybe they're special because they're complete opposites. Maybe one of them is really organized and the other one is a slob. Maybe one of them is really spontaneous and the other one is like the anchor who keeps the stability in the relationship. And they really have these complementary traits to bring to the table to help each other live the best life possible. Maybe they have some kind of really zany coincidence from the past, like they didn't realize it when they first met, but they discovered that they actually were in the same class in preschool. Some kind of crazy coincidence that makes it seem like this relationship was always meant to be. So you want to highlight in a few sentences what makes the couple special. And then at the end, you want to give well wishes and just your final toast statement. So it's really cute, actually, if the well wishes can tie back to a previous part of the speech. So that might sound something like, may you live a long life of endless travel adventures and playing silly practical jokes on everyone you meet. Cheers. Something that ties back to what makes them special, or maybe how they first met. That's the circle pattern. That's when you bring back a theme at the end of the speech that you touched on at the beginning. And it's very powerful. And it makes the speech nice and organized, easy to follow, and memorable. So your time requirement for this speech and every speech will be 5 minutes. That is to ensure that we get through all the speeches and we're able to move through the units effectively. Any less than 2 minutes would probably be too skimpy. You're not going to be going deep enough on these memories and these special emotional details if it's too short. So keep that in mind. Anywhere, I would say, between 2 and 5 minutes will be that golden spot of touching on all the points and going deep enough. In terms of notes, you may have note cards. You can type up your outline and print it out. You can jot it on a piece of notebook paper. You can create a teleprompter for yourself if you're like a techie nerd and you know how to do that. I don't know how to do that, but whatever works for you. I want everybody to do what they are comfortable with. And just a little reminder on structure and formatting your outline. What works for one person may not work for another person. We're all different. I have had students who love to plan. They are perfectionists. They want to make sure they have every line of every word included. The only caution to that is if you completely type out every word you're going to say, the temptation is to look too much at your notes and not be engaging enough with the audience. And sometimes just kind of sound robotic, like you're just kind of going through a script. But if you're just kind of using it to dump all your ideas down on a piece of paper and you're really organized in the way that you choose to highlight it and use your bullet points and symbols to keep yourself on track and make sure you know where you are, that might work for you. The other option is to just do a very, very brief keyword outline that is just the bare bones of this structure. Line by line keywords. The upside to that is that it'll allow you to improvise a lot and have that nice, juicy engagement with the audience as you come to life and play out these stories. The downside could be that you might forget something that you wanted to say and you might have wished you had a few more words. So I would say experiment with this to find out what's best for you. If you have a hunch that you're more of an improviser, keep it very simple with the key words. If as you're practicing you realize you need more, add more. If you're somebody who likes to plan, go ahead, type it all out. If you find that distracts you, you can then eliminate some of those extra words and find out exactly what you need. So the only way to really know is to practice. Do what's right for you. So the focus of this speech is going to be, drumroll, pathos. What is pathos? Pathos is that emotion that you display within your speech and the emotion that you invoke within the audience who is listening to that speech. So this is going to be the depth of content pertaining to life philosophies and observations of the couple, variation in the mood of your performance, and connecting with the audience. Now, every speech we do in this class is going to have ethos, pathos, and logos, but each speech will have a different emphasis. We're doing pathos first because pathos is always going to be important to your performance. That's like the cherry on top that attracts the audience to listen. Let's face it, guys, we're living in an era where attention spans are short. This is the time of TikTok videos and Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and all our exciting apps. We don't want to sit there and listen to a long speech with somebody who has no facial expression, no voice tone, and just utterly dry content, right? We want something that grabs us from the get-go. We're on the edge of our seats. We are riveted. How would you like to run into somebody from this class 20 years from now? And they say, you know what? I still remember your wedding toast. I still remember those heartfelt stories that you told about your brother. I'll never forget it. That would be really special, right? That kind of cementing into a person's memory is usually done through pathos. There are other ways to do it. But when you get your audience to feel a strong emotion, they tend to remember the content. So some other things you're going to want to focus on. Diction and tone. Diction is the way that you enunciate your words. So one way to warm up for diction in a speech is to do some little vocal exercises. Mama made me mash my M&Ms. Unique New York. Unique New York. Unique New York. Those little tongue twisters that you can do that really get your tongue warmed up. You want to use the full space of your mouth, your tongue, your teeth, all together to enunciate your consonants. So we want to avoid things like mumbling, frying the voice, which can be damaging to the vocal cords, sounding muffled, having a pitch that's too low to be heard, having a pitch that's high and ear-piercing. And this is extra challenging because we're doing it on the computer. We're doing it digitally. We're doing it through phones. It's not authentic sound that you would hear if you were really in a room with the person speaking. So that makes diction and tone all the more important so we can all hear you. Facial expressions, showing emotional variation on your face. That is another way, another visual cue that makes us say, I want to listen to this person. I can tell that they really feel what they're saying. Ethos is the convincing establishment of relationship. So you're proving your credibility that the audience is going to want to know why this person chose you to give this speech. What's so special about this relationship that you are the maid of honor or best man? So you want to convince the audience of the relationship that the two of you have together. The logos is going to be your structure. So that is, keeping your speech organized, keeping a version of the structure that I've provided you with, and making sure the audience stays with you along the way. So that's not going off on tangents, not rambling, Keeping it interesting, yes, but also tying it together with a nice bow, with clear transitions and clear organization to your speech. So let's talk a little bit more about pathos. Aristotle believed that invoking emotion was a strategy to make the speech memorable and meaningful to the audience. So first, the audience sees emotion in you. Second, after they see that emotion, they decide, hey, this speech is something I want to hear. I'm going to tune in. Then the audience actually feels moved while experiencing this speech. Maybe they're moved to laughter. Maybe they're moved to tears. Maybe they're moved to experience the emotion of awe. Awe is something that I read, that's AWE, is the most powerful emotion that can connect people together. So maybe in listening to your speech, you bring up a philosophy they've never even thought of before. And they say, oh my gosh, I never looked at love through that lens. I don't know if I'm ever going to look at relationships the same way again. That could be the ultimate way that you move your audience, is changing their worldview. Imagine that. And then the most powerful aftermath would be if the audience continues to think about your speech and remember the content later. You know, as we talked about previously with the example of someone coming up to you 20 years later and recalling your wedding toast. That would mean that your pathos was very effective. And I want you guys to know I'm keeping my expectations neutral. I don't expect your speech to be life-changing. I'm just giving you examples of the ultimate pathos delivery. So there are two different approaches to pulling off pathos. And this is what actors have long understood. There are two different ways that acting is accomplished. And this speech is a little bit of acting because we're not really delivering wedding toasts, right? We're just simulating the act of giving a wedding toast. So you're putting on a bit of a performance. And I truly hope that you guys are maybe able to actually use these speeches. So if you think of somebody you really want to give a wedding toast to, think about it and maybe consider doing this for someone in the future that you can actually use at a wedding. But the two different approaches would be internal emoting or acting, and that's acting that results from emotion felt while performing. So, if you are actually pretending like you are really delivering this speech and you are going through these emotions and you're feeling these memories and these genuine well wishes for your friend, and you end up crying because you're talking about these touching memories and well wishes, that would be internal emoting. Some people might say, it's really hard for me to get in that kind of genuine emotional headspace while giving a speech. So if that is a tough thing to do, you have the option of external emoting. And that's acting that involves going through the motions to the extent that the emotion is eventually felt, whether it was present in the beginning or not. Or if it's not felt, it's awfully convincing. So this would include things like smiling because it's the appropriate emotion to express while telling a funny story. You could even go through your outline and write yourself little notes like smile here, get tears in your eyes here, frown here, get serious here. Little notes to jog your memory about what emotion you're supposed to be showing at which parts. And in that way, it's external emoting. You might never feel these emotions, but your face would make it seem as if you are. So, obviously, the most authentic probably will be internal emoting. That's a way that we can really be convinced and feel your emotion. But with external emoting, you're still getting into the performance aspect of the speech. So, facial expressions should match your tone. the overall tone of the speech. If you're talking about something happy, smile. If you're talking about a sad memory, frown. Your facial expression should match your voice tone. If you're smiling, your voice should sound really enthusiastic too. They should go together. They should be varied throughout the speech, up and down, a variety of different emotions based on what you're saying. Your facial expression should be big and uninhibited. And this can be a real challenge sometimes. Some people don't feel comfortable showing a lot of emotion. And sometimes the defense mechanism could be to just kind of shut down your emotion and just look like you're bored. So I would say, if you know that that's your tendency, and here are some tip-offs if this is your tendency. People might say to you in your day-to-day life, "Are you okay? You look like you might be having a bad day." Or, "Are you having fun? You look like you're kind of bored." So if you're somebody who gets these comments a lot, then what you can do is just totally compensate by going in the other direction. And it might feel a little bit forced at first. It might feel choreographed, but I guarantee over time it'll start to feel more authentic. And what I've told people in the past, if you have a tendency to feel like your delivery is kind of bland, if you feel like you're going in the opposite direction and you're goofy and over the top, you're probably just right. So I'm not telling you guys to mimic my style. I know I'm goofy and over the top. And, I do that to try to get engagement. And especially now that this is all through video, I just want to engage you guys. I'm not telling you to completely copy what I do. That's my style. You have your own style. But I am telling you, if you have been bland in the past, you're not making that connection, you're not getting the responses you want, then you do have the option of going in the other direction. And if you feel like you're as goofy as I look, you're probably just right. Your facial expression should tell your story. We should be able to mute the sound, not that we would want to, but we should be able to, and just be able to look at your face and be able to tell the overall mood of your speech. Okay, now, emotional depth. This is your content. This is how you allow others to share in your emotion by the words that you actually choose to write and speak. This is how you're going to paint your picture with those beautiful montages. This is how you get specific by describing general human experiences. This is how you share your unique insights with the audience. And this is how you explain why the content of your speech is significant to your life and the lives of others. So what meaning do you take from these events that you're describing? And I wanted to offer a few other etiquette tips, just a few words of caution in the event that you guys are really giving wedding toasts and in this simulation in our class. So there are a few subjects that you're not going to want to touch on out of common courtesy. Wedding night jokes. You don't need to put an image in anybody's head about what's going to be happening between that couple later after the wedding. It's pretty much assumed, and that's kind of like, I know it's a low-hanging fruit temptation as a joke, but we just don't really need to go there. I know you guys have more creativity in you. I know you can find other forms of humor. You don't want to get into specifics of past relationships. So what does that mean? That means referring to exes. You don't need to say things like, "We all know Jimmy's really been through the ringer. Anyone who met Donna, his ex-wife, knows that." We don't need to go there. This day is about these two people who have just exchanged vows and are really happy and optimistic about their future together. So you could say something like, "God bless the broken road," or, it's been a journey. The road to finding each other was not a linear path. Something like that, but we don't need to get into the specifics. There are plenty of other points to make where you can get into those specifics and paint a picture. This isn't one of them. And, The next point is something that is very, very important, probably one of the most important topics that you want to stay away from. You don't want to tell embarrassing stories that paint the person in a negative light. You don't want to embarrass them. If you make them blush over a little joke from a long time ago that's harmless, that's okay. But you don't want to talk about things like drunken nights or irresponsible behavior, or the time they had to spend a night in jail because of a shenanigan downtown. Anything that everyone in the audience probably doesn't already know and doesn't need to know. And you don't want to bring in inside jokes that nobody else finds funny. So don't call the person a nickname, for instance, that only you have for them. If this isn't a nickname that everyone calls them, just don't go there. Or if you do call them the nickname and you have a funny story of why, you could include that. If you bring up an inside joke, just explain why. Explain the background story of how that joke came to be. We don't want anyone to feel left out or just like, huh? You don't want to be the only person laughing. So be inclusive with your audience. So in general, when you're determining what content is appropriate, apply the grandmother test. Pretend like you were giving this toast straight to the person's grandmother and include content that the grandmother will find funny and relatable, and the other audience members probably will too. That's not to tell you guys to play it safe. I want to encourage you to be funny and to tell all kinds of stories and special memories, but you really do want to be inclusive with your audience. Okay, so now we're going to get into some specific examples.
The story falls flat with, "It seems crazy that the bride and groom came together. They had a lot of obstacles." You're going to want to dig deeper to engage the audience in the art of storytelling. How about this? As some of you may know, the bride and groom were childhood sweethearts. Yes, it sounds cliche, but in their case it's true. At the age of 5, these two were playing flashlight tag and chasing fireflies around the neighborhood. Not everyone is as lucky to live next door to their soulmate, but their brief childhood romance was short-lived because Ashley's dad was transferred to the West Coast while the two were still young. Although it would seem impossible that these two would ever cross paths again, as fate would have it, they met once more in college while studying abroad in Italy. I don't know if any of you out there have ever felt like you were in the presence of divine intervention, but when I see the love between Robert and Ashley, who came back together against all odds, I know an incomprehensible, powerful force was at work. Now let's go back to the previous statement, knowing all that backstory. It seems crazy that the bride and groom came together. They had a lot of obstacles. That falls a bit flat. Don't you think knowing the background story about how they came together and then were torn apart and then came back together again adds so much more depth? If you heard the statement that fell flat in a toast and then you happen to ask somebody at the reception, "Hey, what's the story about how these two came together?" and you heard all that, wouldn't you be wondering why it wasn't included in the toast? That's the juicy part of a toast. So keep that in mind. A statement like this, "My sister and I share a special bond." Okay, that's very sweet, but it doesn't really create any kind of an image. A lot of sisters share a special bond. Probably most sisters share a special bond. But what does that look like? Baby sister, come what may, the memories between us will last a lifetime. You may be grown and married today, but in my mind's eye, I'll always cherish the childhood memories of hushed secrets when we were supposed to be sleeping, stolen cookies when we were supposed to be waiting until after dinner, and joyriding when we were supposed to be at school. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But you know what I remember the most? Laughter. Everyone in the family knew us as the little girls who always giggled. You've brought me joy every day of my life, and today I wish you enough joy to last a lifetime. So So with that, we get that stream of memories. We can actually picture these little girls, you know, hiding under the covers, telling secrets at nighttime, stealing cookies before dinner, rebelling and ditching school together when they were in high school. So this creates an image. Some phrases are just too vague to guarantee that the audience will relate. Love is a lot of hard work. Well, if you've been in a long relationship, or even a short relationship that was difficult, this might be a phrase that resonates with you. But there's no guarantee. So how do we create a phrase that the audience will completely relate to? You got to dig a little deeper to make the audience relate. Anyone who has ever been in a serious relationship of any kind knows it's not always sunshine and roses. Along with anything in life that exists on a spectrum, love is one of those emotions accompanied by ups and downs, pleasure and pain. But Ryan and Rebecca have shown the kind of persistence that proves they can weather the storm. And then, of course, after saying something like that, you might want to go into a little more detail about how they showed persistence and how they weathered the storm. But that's a nice little intro to tell a story and make the audience relate by digging a little bit deeper. When you throw out a blunt statement, it can stunt the sharing of perceptions. So to say something like, life isn't always fair. Again, we might be able to relate, but that doesn't conjure any kind of an image, and it kind of creates a little mystery. And of course, when we hear a mystery, we want to solve it, right? We want to know the backstory. Dig a little deeper, sharing your perceptions. When Jeff and I lost our dad at such a young age, we lost an aspect of our childhood. With such a deep loss, we couldn't deny the harsh realities of life and death. I hated seeing my little brother lose that bright-eyed and bushy-tailed innocence. But when Jeff met Michelle, that light slowly came back into his eyes. I never knew that someone's faith in humanity could be restored and that innocence could be revived. But Michelle, you did that for my brother. And that is why I have no doubt you are a gift from God and his soul's true counterpart. That's a little nod to Wedding Crashers, that last sentence about the soul's true counterpart. So you can see that in sharing your perceptions and digging deeper, you really get below the surface. It's way deeper and way more meaningful and way more impactful than just the blunt statement, life isn't always fair. When you don't explain opinions, you don't really explain the lessons learned. You just kind of throw out a philosophy without explaining, the underlying life experiences that you may have had that might explain why you feel that way. I always thought that love was a battlefield. This is a common expression, but if I heard somebody say this in a wedding toast, I'd be thinking, ooh, what happened to you? Dig deeper to share a lesson learned. When my parents divorced and most of my friends' parents followed suit, I became hardened. It seemed like love was something intangible that either wasn't real or didn't last. I'll admit, I was a bit of a player back in the day. Always playing the field and never settling down. I thought I was living the dream. But it wasn't until the decades rolled by that I realized Fred and Hazel have the real thing. Now as I stand here at this 50th wedding anniversary, I realize that not only is love real, but it can withstand the test of time. So much more meaningful than I always thought love was a battlefield. Dig deep. Okay, so now we have a few examples that I would just like you guys to go one by one and just kind of brainstorm about what some of these vague phrases might mean, what it might mean to you, what it might mean to an audience, and how someone might be able to expand upon these things. I hope you enjoy using your imagination, putting yourself in the shoes of a Toastmaster, and composing your wedding toast. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your speeches.